The first thing that felt wrong was the chair. Not the flowers, not the dress, not the vows everyone kept asking if I had memorized. It was the chair, that stupid white folding chair at the front of the hall. We were in this downtown event space that our planner kept calling industrial chic, as if exposed brick and dim Edison bulbs could hold a relationship together. The rain had started that morning, soft at first, then steadier, until the city outside the tall windows looked washed in gray watercolor. The photographer loved it, said it was moody, cinematic. To me, it just felt like the sky was tired. I remember standing near the front rows with my boutonniere pinned slightly crooked, watching guests shuffle and hug and laugh in their clean suits and borrowed dresses. The room smelled like perfume and coffee and damp umbrellas. There was this low, constant hum of voices and cutlery and distant traffic. And then I saw her, Lena, my bride, my almost wife. She was across the room, near the arch where we'd say our vows, talking to her cousin. Her dress had this soft satin sheen that drank in the low light. Her hair was pinned up, a few curls falling around her face the way I always loved. When she laughed, her shoulders moved, but her eyes didn't. They landed on me once, just for a second, and whatever expression she had faded into something flat and unreadable. People tell you about cold feet like it's quirky and kind of cute. No one tells you what it feels like to be the one she's walking away from in slow motion. We had been distant for weeks, little things at first. Late nights at work events she'd never mention in detail. The way her phone suddenly had a passcode when it never did before. The way she started staying in the shower longer, like she needed the water to scrub something off her skin that I couldn't see. Our dinners changed. They used to be messy takeout containers, and both of us squeezed onto the same side of the couch, watching something we'd seen 100 times. She'd steal fries off my plate and laugh when I pretended to be mad. Lately, it was quieter. We'd sit at opposite ends of the tiny dining table in our apartment, the city humming outside our fourth-floor windows, her face lit by the blue glow of her phone. My fork scraping silently against a plate I no longer bothered to fill. Long day. Yeah. Anything you want to talk about? Not really. Nothing terrible, nothing dramatic, just the sound of something important drifting out of reach. But today was supposed to fix it. That's what I kept telling myself. A wedding is a reset button, right? You stand in front of everyone, make promises, and somehow the universe hears you and decides that love is enough. When it was time for the ceremony to start, I walked down the aisle first, like we'd rehearsed. The pianist started playing some stripped-down version of a song we'd chosen on a night when we still talked about the future like it belonged to us. I took my place at the front, hands clasped, legs slightly shaking. My brother Mark stood beside me as best man. He whispered, "You good," out of the corner of his mouth. "Yeah," I said. I wasn't. The doors opened. Everyone stood up. She looked beautiful, unreachable. Her father walked her down the aisle, their arms linked. She kept her eyes on some point above my head, like she was aiming for a horizon only she could see. When she finally reached me, our hands touched, and it felt like shaking hands with a polite stranger. Her palm was dry, controlled. We got through the vows. The officiant talked about commitment and weathering storms and the beauty of choosing each other, again and again, even when it's hard. The words echoed in the hall, soft against the brick, and I saw her jaw tighten with each sentence. The kiss was brief, polite, everyone clapped. At the reception, the hall was rearranged. Tables, candles, clinking glasses. The DJ played something inoffensive and mid-tempo, while people lined up at the buffet. The rain tapped softly at the windows like it wanted in. Our table was at the front, facing everyone. 2 white chairs, a garland of greenery, little name cards with our names in looping gold script. Lena and Daniel. I stared at them like proof that this was real, that we had actually done this. I'd barely eaten all day. My stomach was a tight knot of nerves and hope and something darker I didn't want to name. I carried my plate, barely any food, mostly salad I wasn't going to touch, and walked toward our table. Lena was already there. She sat in the chair with her name card, posture perfect, laughing at something the groomsman next to her had just said. His name was Ian. They'd worked together, she once told me, a little too casually. I watched his hand rest a second too long on the back of her chair as he leaned in. She didn't move away. I told myself I was being paranoid, that this was just how people were at weddings, touchy, drunk, overly affectionate. I reached the table, trying to push the unease down, trying to focus on the reality. She was my wife now. That meant something. It had to. I went to sit in the empty chair next to her, my chair. As I pulled it out, the legs scraping softly against the polished concrete floor, she turned her head slightly. Her smile vanished like someone had flipped a switch. Her eyes darted to the guests, then to me, then down at my hand on the chair. She leaned in, her veil brushed my arm. Her perfume, jasmine and something sharp underneath, hit me all at once. Her lips barely moved. "Not here," she whispered. "Go sit over there." At first, I didn't understand. I thought she was joking. What? I murmured back, my voice catching in my throat. Her eyes didn't soften. If anything, they hardened like glass catching light. She flicked her gaze toward the far corner of the room. An empty table set for two, half hidden near the bar. Daniel, she said, still whispering, her jaw tight. Please, not here, go sit there. There, away from her, away from the head table. Away from the life I thought we were stepping into together. My hand froze on the back of the chair. The hall felt quieter somehow, like someone had closed a door in my head. I could still see mouths moving, forks clinking against plates, a distant laugh, but everything sounded like it was happening underwater. Why? I asked, barely audible. She didn't answer right away. Her fingers dug into her napkin, twisting it in her lap. Ian glanced between us, his smile flattening as he realized something was off. Her father, seated on her other side, studiously focused on his drink. Just do it, she said finally. Please, don't make a scene. Don't make a scene, like I was about to flip the table, like I hadn't spent months trying to ignore every red flag fluttering in the periphery of our life. I followed her gaze again to the corner table. 2 plates, 2 sets of cutlery, 2 chairs, no name cards, no decorations, just a place to put someone you didn't want to be seen with, someone you wanted to keep separate. The groom who didn't belong next to his bride. The room felt suddenly cold. My fingers went numb around the chair. Lena, I whispered, feeling something crack inside my chest. I'm your husband. Her eyes flicked over my shoulder, toward her mother watching us from a nearby table, then to the photographer who had paused, camera half lifted. Her throat bobbed as she swallowed. I know, she said. That's why I'm asking you. Please just go sit over there, we'll talk later. Later, always later. People were starting to notice. The laughter had dimmed by a degree. My brother had half risen from his seat behind me, his eyes narrowed. I felt the weight of 100 unspoken judgments pressing against my back. I let go of the chair. The scrape of its legs as I pushed it back sounded louder than any music. Slowly, like a man walking into his own funeral, I turned away from my wife and started toward the lonely table in the corner. Every step felt heavier, tethered to the realization forming in my gut. When I reached the table, I pulled out a chair and sat down alone. The city's gray light fell across the white tablecloth, turning it almost blue. The rain outside had picked up, streaking the windows with uneven lines. I looked up. From across the room, Lena had already turned away, laughing again at something Ian said, her smile wide, her hand resting just a little too close to his. In that moment, surrounded by people who thought they were witnessing the happiest day of my life, I realized I might be the only one in the room who understood what was actually happening. This wasn't a beginning, it was the end of something I hadn't yet named. I stared at my untouched plate, the hum of the reception blurring into a dull roar, and felt a single, terrifying thought settle in my chest like a stone. If this isn't my seat next to her, where exactly do I belong now? The rain hit the glass in harder bursts, and somewhere near the head table, a camera flash went off, capturing a moment that would never tell the whole story. I lifted my eyes one more time, just in time to see Lena's hand slip beneath the tablecloth, disappearing from sight toward Ian's side. I couldn't see exactly what she was doing. But I saw his jaw tense, his smile twitch like he'd just been touched. And that was the moment my fork slipped from my fingers and hit the plate with a sharp, lonely ring that no one bothered to hear. The night didn't fall all at once. It frayed at the edges first. After that moment at the table, everything blurred into snapshots, like someone shuffling through a stack of photographs too fast. The speeches, the clinking glasses. The first dance that felt like a polite performance more than a promise. I remember standing in the middle of the dance floor with Lena, one hand at her waist, the other holding her fingers lightly. The song we'd chosen played softly, some slow, nostalgic track about forever. Our guests watched us with soft smiles, phones held up to record. Her eyes stayed fixed somewhere over my shoulder. When I tried to pull her a little closer, her spine stiffened. "You're holding me too tight," she murmured, her lips barely moving. "Too tight." I loosened my grip until my hand just hovered there, barely touching the fabric of her dress. We rotated in stiff, practiced circles under the fairy lights, the polished floor reflecting a version of us that looked better than the real thing. Everyone saw romance. All I felt was distance. Later, people told me the wedding was beautiful. Perfect, they said. Magical. It's strange how easily a lie can look good in photographs. We left the reception late, after too many drinks and not enough food. The car ride to the hotel was quiet. The driver tried to make small talk about the rain, about how lucky we were that the ceremony itself had stayed dry. Lena stared out the window, her veil removed, hair falling in tired waves around her face. Streetlights slid across her expression, highlighting then hiding the tension in her jaw. "You okay?" I asked, my voice low. "I'm fine," she said. She didn't ask me the same. At the hotel, the hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and stale carpet. The keycard light flashed green, and the door opened into a room that someone had tried to make romantic with scattered rose petals and a bottle of champagne in a silver bucket. I heard the muffled thump of traffic far below. The rain had softened to a hush against the glass. She went straight to the bathroom without turning on the main lights. The door closed with a soft click. I stood in the middle of the room in my slightly wrinkled suit, staring at the bed. The white sheets looked too bright, too clean. The petals looked staged, almost ridiculous. Our wedding night. My chest ached with something I couldn't name. After a while, water started running. The shower. I sat on the edge of the bed, loosening my tie, my mind replaying the image of her at the head table, laughing with Ian while I sat alone in the corner. I pulled out my phone, not even sure what I was going to do with it. Scroll, distract myself, anything. That's when the screen lit up. One new notification, not for me. Her phone was on the dresser near the TV, the screen glowing in the dim room. Her passcode had changed weeks ago, but the notification preview still lit up. A message, from a name I didn't recognize at first. Don't forget what we talked about. You don't owe him anything. My stomach dropped, the name above the message. Just the letter, Ian. The bathroom door was still closed. The water still ran. I walked over slowly, each step muffled by the carpet. The phone buzzed again. Another message, from I. Did you tell him about us yet? My hand tightened around my own phone. My heart hammered against my ribs in a dull, relentless rhythm. There it was, no more excuses, no more rationalizing late nights and changed passwords and sudden unexplained distance. Us. The room felt smaller, the air heavier. I stared at the screen, at those words, at that single letter, pretending to be anonymous when it wasn't. Then the water stopped. Panic surged through me. I stepped back from the dresser like I'd touched something burning, heart pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I sat back on the bed, trying to look normal, whatever that meant now. The bathroom door opened. Lena stepped out in a hotel robe, damp hair falling over her shoulders. Her face was clean, makeup gone, eyes tired. She looked younger like that, softer, and for a dangerous second, I almost forgot the messages. I almost believed in the version of her I'd loved before all this, but the glow of her phone on the dresser dragged me back. She followed my gaze to the screen. Something flickered across her face, a quick flash of fear, then calculation, then something like resignation. She walked over, picked up the phone, turned the screen away from me, and locked it with a quick tap. "You're not changing?" she asked, nodding toward my clothes as if nothing had shifted. "Who's I asked. Her shoulders tensed, just slightly, but enough. She didn't answer right away. She took her time plugging in the charger, setting her phone down carefully. The silence stretched between us, filled with the distant hum of the city and the faint drip of water from the showerhead she hadn't turned all the way off. "You went through my phone?" she finally asked. Her voice was quiet, but it had an edge. "I didn't need to go through it," I said. The messages popped up. Her jaw clenched. "So you read them?" "I saw enough." She sighed, this long, weary sound, like I'd just confirmed something she'd already decided about me. "That's not fair," she said. "You don't know the context." "Okay," I replied, my throat dry. "So give me the context. What did you tell him about us? What is it you don't owe me?" She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes were red around the edges, not from crying. She hadn't cried once that day, but from sheer exhaustion. "This is our wedding night," she said. "Can we not do this right now?" "Our wedding night is exactly why we need to do this right now," I answered. "You asked me to sit away from you, at our own wedding. You told me to go sit in the corner like I was, some distant relative, not your husband. And now I see messages from him." "Stop," she cut in, her voice suddenly sharp. "Just stop." The word hung in the air. She walked to the window and pulled back the curtain. The city lights spilled in, a wash of white and yellow and red. Raindrops streaked down the glass, distorting everything outside into soft, blurred lines. "He's just a friend," she said finally, still looking out. "That's not how friends talk," I replied. Silence. "He's the reason you didn't want me at the head table, isn't he?" I continued. "You didn't want me in the pictures next to you. Not really. You didn't want me too close." She flinched just a little. "I didn't want drama," she said. "You've been tense. Lately, I could feel it. I didn't want you making accusations in front of everyone." "I sat alone at our wedding," I said, the words tasting bitter. "Do you understand how that felt?" She turned around slowly. Her eyes were shiny now, but still dry. "I understand more than you think," she murmured. "What does that mean?" "It means," she said, choosing each word carefully, "that maybe we shouldn't have gone through with this." There it was, the quiet, careful bomb. My chest tightened. "Then why did we?" She looked at me, and for the first time that day, I saw a crack in her composure. Guilt, fear, and something else, something like longing, but not for me. Because it was easier, she whispered. Because it was already planned. Because everyone was here. Because I wanted to want this. The room spun softly around the edges. How long? I asked. She frowned. How long what? How long has there been an us to tell him about? Her lips parted. She hesitated. Don't ask me that, she said. I'm your husband, I answered, swallowing hard. If I can't ask you that, then what am I? She wrapped her arms around herself, the robe bunching at her elbows. She looked so small suddenly, standing there against the backdrop of the city. It started before the engagement, she said finally, but it wasn't supposed to be serious. It was a mistake that kept happening. A mistake that kept happening. The phrase lodged itself somewhere between my lungs and my throat. And you still said yes when I proposed, I said. She nodded once quickly. I thought I could choose you. I thought if I committed to you, it would override everything else. That's what people do, right? They make a choice and the rest fades away. I laughed. It came out broken. That's not how it works, Lena. She dropped her gaze. The clock on the nightstand ticked softly. 11:32 p.m. Our first night as husband and wife already fracturing. I didn't want to hurt you, she whispered. You did, I said, my voice barely steady. You already did. You just made it official in front of 100 people. The city outside kept moving, unaware. Cars, lights, strangers going home to lives that made sense. She took a small step closer to the window, away from me. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. I stared at her, at the rain-slicked glass behind her, at the way the reflections made it look like she was standing in two places at once. Do you want to? I asked. The question hung between us, heavy and fragile. She didn't answer immediately. Her thumb traced the edge of the window frame. The rain outside tapped a slow, irregular rhythm. Daniel, she finally said, without turning around, I think I already made my choice, and I just didn't say it out loud. Somewhere deep inside me, something quiet and hopeful finally went still. I sat down on the edge of the bed, the mattress dipping under my weight, and stared at the pattern of petals scattered across the sheets. So where do we go from here? I asked. She finally looked at me, eyes shining with unshed tears she still refused to let fall. I don't know, she said, but maybe not together, not really. The words landed softly, no shouting, no slammed doors. Just the quiet acknowledgement of something that had been true long before we walked down that aisle. I lay back on the bed without undressing, staring up at the ceiling. She stayed by the window, a silhouette against the city lights, rain tracing ghostly paths down the glass behind her. At some point, without speaking, she took a pillow and a blanket and curled up on the small couch by the wall. 2 people, 1 room, a gulf between us larger than any distance outside. Sleep didn't come for me. Instead, I lay there, watching the faint flicker of headlights move across the ceiling and wondering how a life could fall apart so quietly that no one outside the room would ever know. At 3:17 a.m., her phone buzzed again. She didn't move, but I saw her shoulders tense. And in that tiny movement in the dark, I understood that this wasn't just about a mistake. There was another man in our marriage, and somewhere, not that far away, he was awake too. Waiting for a message she would someday send, just not tonight. The weeks after the wedding were a series of empty chairs. The first was at our kitchen table. I moved back into the apartment alone while she stayed with her parents to think. The wording was careful, neutral. It sounded almost responsible. In reality, it meant she got to step out of the mess she'd helped create while I sat in it and tried to remember how to breathe. The city outside didn't change. The same gray mornings, the same hum of traffic, the same smell of coffee drifting up from the cafe downstairs. But inside, everything was rearranged. Her mug was gone from the dish rack, her coat missing from the hook by the door. Her pillow removed from the bed. It was like she'd been quietly erased. I went back to work. People asked about the wedding. They wanted stories, funny moments, details. How was it? Still feels surreal, huh? Got any honeymoon plans? I learned how to lie. It was great. Yeah, surreal. We're still figuring out dates. I never mentioned that we spent our wedding night in the same room, separated by silence and a couch. That the honeymoon had been postponed indefinitely, a phrase she used with a straight face before she left. The second empty chair was at my brother's place. He invited me over for dinner one evening, a few days after she'd gone to her parents'. He said it casually, like it was just dinner, nothing special. But when I got there, he'd already ordered my favorite takeout and put on a playlist he knew I liked. His wife, Mia, hugged me a little too tightly at the door. We're glad you're here, she said. We sat around their small dining table. There were 4 chairs, only 3 were occupied. They didn't ask much at first, just let me talk about work, traffic, trivial things. Then when the plates were mostly empty and the conversation had thinned, Mark leaned back and studied me. "You're not wearing your ring," he said. I looked down at my bare hand. I'd stopped wearing it the morning after the hotel, when I realized it left my skin aching beneath the metal. "It didn't feel right," I answered. He nodded slowly. "Do you want to tell me what happened?" I stared at the wood grain of the table, tracing a scratch near my plate with my thumb. The words felt heavy, sticky. "She's in love with someone else," I said finally. The silence that followed was respectful, careful, not shocked, not really, just sad. Mia swallowed. "Has it been going on a long time?" "Long enough that our wedding was more of a formality than a beginning," I said. Mark's jaw tightened. "Do you want me to talk to her?" "No," I replied quickly. "This is mine to deal with." But mine felt wrong. It felt like standing under a collapse and calling the rubble personal. Nights were the worst. Sleep came in fragments, if at all. I'd lie in bed listening to the soft hum of the fridge, the occasional car passing by, the pipes in the walls ticking. The apartment felt too big and too small all at once. Her absence had a shape. It sat in the empty side of the closet. It lay across the sofa where she used to fall asleep mid-movie. I kept waiting for anger to fully arrive. The kind of hot, clean rage people talk about after betrayal, but what settled in instead was quieter. A dull, persistent ache. Confusion, like my body hadn't caught up with the facts yet. Then, one afternoon about a month later, she came back. I heard the key in the lock before I saw her. The sound froze me halfway through stirring a pot of pasta on the stove. The door opened. She stepped inside with a small overnight bag and an expression that looked carefully neutral. Her hair was pulled back, face bare. She wasn't wearing her rings either. "Hey," she said. The word felt too simple for the weight it carried. "Hey," I echoed. She closed the door softly behind her and stood for a moment as if unsure whether she was allowed to come any further. "Do you have a minute?" she asked. I turned off the stove. The smell of tomato sauce lingered, warm and oddly domestic. For a second, it almost felt like nothing had changed. "Yeah," I said. "I have more than a minute." She winced at that, just slightly. We sat at the kitchen table. She chose the chair opposite mine, leaving the space between us as intact as possible. Her bag sat near the door like a question mark. "How are you?" she asked. It was such a normal question, in such an abnormal moment, that I almost laughed. "Mostly existing," I replied. "You?" She looked down at her hands, twisting them together. "I've been trying to figure out what to say," she admitted. "The truth would be a good start," I said. She nodded. "You're right." The clock above the microwave ticked quietly. Outside, the afternoon light was soft and gray, the kind that made everything look a little washed out. "I ended things with him," she said suddenly. The words hung in the air like they weren't sure where to land. "Why?" I asked, my voice careful. "Because it was wrong," she said. "Because I hurt you. Because I hurt myself. Because it was built on lies and secrecy and this fantasy that doesn't survive in daylight." I studied her. "Did you end it because you realized you wanted us, or because you felt guilty?" She flinched. "Does it matter?" "It does to me," I said. Her eyes met mine, filled with something like desperation. "I don't know what I want," she said, voice breaking a little for the first time. "That's the truth. I'm not going to sit here and pretend I had some sudden epiphany that you're the love of my life and I was just temporarily confused. It's not that clean." Honesty, it hurt, but it was something. "So why are you here?" I asked. "Because I couldn't stop thinking about you sitting alone at that table," she said, her voice soft. "Every time I close my eyes, that's what I see. You in your suit, looking like someone had pulled a chair out from under your entire life. I did that, and I walked away into a future that suddenly felt thin." Her eyes glistened now. She blinked rapidly, but a tear slipped free anyway, tracing a slow path down her cheek. "I kept waiting to feel relief," she continued. "Like, okay, it's over, I've chosen, I can breathe." But instead, I just felt hollow. And guilty, and like I'd broken something in myself that I don't know how to fix. She exhaled, shaky. "I'm not here to ask you to pretend it never happened," she said. "I'm not here to ask for forgiveness I haven't earned. I just needed to see you, to tell you that you didn't imagine it. Something was wrong, and I'm the one who made it that way." I sat back, letting her words settle. The man I'd imagined 100 times, the other man, felt suddenly less important than the person in front of me. Not because he didn't exist, but because the real damage came from the person who had vowed to choose me and then didn't. "Did you love him?" I asked. She hesitated. "I thought I did. Or I loved the version of myself I got to be with him. No history, no expectations, no wait. Just this feeling of being wanted without having to carry the parts of myself I was ashamed of." "And with me." "With you," she said, "I felt seen." "Which is harder. You knew my family, my past, my fears. You saw the nights I couldn't sleep, the mornings I didn't want to get out of bed. You knew too much. Loving you meant being honest. And I was too cowardly for that, I guess." The honesty cut clean, but it cut true. "So what are you asking me?" I said. She looked up, tears finally spilling freely. "I'm not asking you to take me back," she said. "I don't deserve that. I know that. I want to know if there's any part of you that believes we could someday sit at the same table again, without that night sitting between us like another person." Her hands trembled. She clasped them together to steady them. "I miss you," she whispered. "Not the wedding, not the idea of marriage, not the version of us people saw on Instagram. You, the person who knows how I take my coffee and why I hate Sunday nights. The person who used to wait up for me when I was late, even if I didn't deserve it." The apartment felt heavy with history. I thought about the nights we'd shared before everything went wrong, the quiet mornings. The way she used to press her cold feet against my legs under the blankets and laugh when I yelped. I also thought about the hotel room, the messages from the way she'd stood at the window and said she might not want to fix this. Both versions were real. Both versions lived in her. "I don't know if I can ever unknow what you did," I said quietly. "I don't know if I can look at you and not see you turning away from me at our own wedding." Her face crumpled for a moment. Not dramatically, just a small collapse around the eyes and mouth. "I understand," she said. "If this is the last conversation we have, I'll still be grateful I got to say this much." She wiped at her cheeks quickly, as if embarrassed by the tears. "I brought the ring," she added, reaching into her bag. She placed it on the table between us, the circle of metal catching the dim light. "It doesn't belong on my hand right now, maybe ever." The ring looked tiny and heavy at the same time. A symbol of something we'd both mishandled. "Do you regret marrying me?" I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. She looked at me, eyes soft and raw. "I regret hurting you," she said. "I regret not being honest before we stood in front of everyone. I regret choosing silence when you deserved the truth, but marrying you." She paused, choosing the words carefully. "I think I regret the timing more than the act," she said. "You were ready, I wasn't, and instead of saying that, I tried to catch up to you by pretending. That's on me." A faint sound drifted up from the street below, a car horn, someone laughing, the world continuing as hours stalled. "So what happens now?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air, suspended between hope and resignation. Her eyes searched mine, looking for something, anger, forgiveness, anything she could work with. My gaze dropped to the ring on the table. The metal circle glinted faintly, a closed loop with no clear entry point. Part of me wanted to reach for it. Another part wanted to slide it farther away. Instead, I just sat there, my hand hovering in the empty space between us, unable to move in either direction. Her breath hitched as she watched that hand. The distance between my fingers and the ring was only a few inches. The distance between who we had been and who we were now felt immeasurable. "I don't know," I said at last. "I don't know what happens now." Her shoulders sagged, the last of her composure unraveling. "Then maybe," she whispered, "for now, nothing. Maybe we let the not knowing be what it is. And if someday you want to know if I'm still sitting alone at some table, you'll call. And if you don't, I'll understand." She stood slowly, her chair scraping softly against the floor. "Thank you for letting me come," she said, "even if it doesn't change anything." She turned toward the door, leaving the ring where it lay between us. I opened my mouth to call after her, to say something, anything, that might clarify what we were, what we weren't, what we might someday move toward. But the words didn't come. The door closed with a gentle click. The apartment fell silent again, the only sound the distant murmur of the city and the faint ticking of the kitchen clock. I stared at the ring, the afternoon light fading slowly into evening. For a long time I just sat there, hands still hovering in that empty space, the air between my fingers and the metal growing colder. Letting go didn't happen all at once. It happened in small, quiet ways. It happened the morning I woke up and realized I hadn't dreamed about the wedding in 3 nights straight. No slow-motion replay of the chair. No muffled soundtrack of polite applause over a hollow ceremony, just blank, restful dark. It happened when I stopped checking her social media, scrolling through filtered snapshots of a life that had nothing to do with the conversations we'd had at 2 a.m. when she couldn't sleep. It happened when her mug stopped feeling like hers and became just another chipped cup in the back of the cabinet. Months passed. The city shifted seasons. Rain gave way to heavy summer air, then back again. The light changed in the apartment window, moving across the opposite building in different angles, different shades. Papers were filed, signatures were given. The legal part of it was surprisingly sterile. A few meetings, some forms, a small courtroom where people whispered about dates and assets and timelines. The word annulment hovered like an escape hatch neither of us quite reached for in time, so it became divorce instead, an ending that implied something real had existed, even if only briefly. We sat together in the judge's cramped office the last time. Not side by side, not quite opposite either. Parallel. The judge spoke in calm, practiced tones, reading through the final agreement. Neither of us had much to fight over. No house, no children, just the memory of a day that looked beautiful in photos and broken in every way that mattered. Do you both agree? The judge asked. I glanced at Lena. She looked different, older maybe. Not in years, but in the way her shoulders held themselves, in the way her eyes no longer darted toward the door as if looking for escape. Yes, she said. Yes, I echoed. The pen felt heavy in my hand as I signed. My name looked strange on the lines, like someone else had written it. Afterward, we stepped out into the hallway together. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The air smelled vaguely of dust and paper. Well, she said, a humorless smile tugging at one corner of her mouth. I guess that's it. I nodded, I guess so. We walked down the stairs in silence. At the entrance, the glass doors framed a gray morning, traffic moving, people rushing by with coffee cups and umbrellas. Do you ever think about that table? She asked suddenly, eyes still on the street. The question caught me off guard. Every time I sit down somewhere new, I said. She nodded slowly. Me too. We stood there, side by side, not touching. The traffic light outside cycled from red to green. A pair of teenagers laughed as they passed, utterly unaware of the small ending happening just inside the glass. I'm not with him anymore, she said quietly. I figured, I replied. How? You don't talk about him the way people talk about someone they're still trying to justify, I said. You talk about him like a decision you made when you didn't like yourself very much. She exhaled softly. That's not inaccurate. For a moment, the old familiarity flickered between us. The shared understanding, the ability to read between each other's lines. It hurt more than it comforted. Are you happy? She asked. The question hung there. I'm learning to be okay, I said. That feels like enough for now. She looked up at me then, really looked, and there was a softness in her expression that didn't ask for anything in return. I'm glad, she said. You deserve okay. And more than that, someday. The rain started again, light, almost apologetic. I should go, she added. Yeah, I said, me too. She turned toward me, hesitated, then extended her hand. Not for a hug. Not for a final grasp at what we were, just a handshake. Two people acknowledging the truth of what they had and what they'd lost. I took her hand. It was warm, familiar. Goodbye, Daniel, she said. Goodbye, Lena. Our hands parted. She stepped out into the gray morning, pulling her jacket tighter around herself. The door closed slowly, the soft thud echoing in the small lobby. I watched her walk down the steps, merge with the cluster of strangers, and disappear around the corner. She didn't look back, neither did I later in the apartment. The morning light fell differently across the floor. It was thinner now, filtered through a new construction site that had gone up across the street. Dust motes floated in the beam of light, small and restless. I made coffee. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and grounding. I poured it into a plain mug, not hers, not mine, just a mug, and sat at the table. The same table where the ring had once sat between us. I ran my fingers over the surface, tracing invisible lines. The chair across from me was empty, but it didn't feel accusatory anymore. It just was a chair. A place where someone might sit someday. Or not. Letting go turned out to be less about releasing her, and more about releasing the version of myself that needed her to make sense of who he was. I had been the man who waited for her texts. The man who believed that standing next to someone in front of a room full of witnesses meant something unbreakable. The man who thought that love was a guarantee instead of a choice repeated over time. Now I was just a man sitting in a small apartment on a quiet morning, breathing in the smell of coffee and listening to the low, distant hum of the city. And that was okay. At some point, I opened the drawer where I'd put the ring. It lay there small and bright against the dark wood. I picked it up, feeling its weight in my palm. There was no anger left in me for it, no attachment either. It was just metal shaped into a promise we weren't ready to keep. I turned it between my fingers one last time, then closed my hand around it. Later that afternoon, I walked to the small pawn shop 2 blocks over. The bell over the door chimed softly when I entered. The man behind the counter looked at the ring, then at me. Didn't work out, he asked, not unkindly. Something like that, I said. He named a price. It wasn't much. It didn't need to be. The value had never really been in the metal. When I stepped back out onto the sidewalk, my hand felt strangely light. The rain had stopped. The clouds were beginning to break, patches of pale blue peeking through. A thin ray of sunlight slipped between 2 buildings, landing on the wet pavement, making it shimmer. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was walking away from something. I was just walking. Back at the apartment, the light had shifted again, softer now, edging toward evening. I opened the window a crack and let the cool air in. I sat down in my usual chair at the table, letting the quiet settle around me. If someone had looked in through the window at that moment, They might have seen a man alone in a small room and assumed the worst, that he'd been left, that he'd lost, that he was broken. And they wouldn't have been entirely wrong, but they would have missed the other truth too. That sometimes, the most honest kind of love you can offer someone is the choice not to keep them, when keeping them means both of you are pretending. That sometimes the bravest thing you can do is accept that not every story you start is one you're meant to finish together. I lifted my coffee cup, the ceramic warm against my fingers, and took a slow sip. The city hummed, the light thinned. The room stayed quiet. For the first time since that day at the wedding, sitting alone didn't feel like being pushed away from my place in the world. It felt like I was finally, slowly, finding it. Alone didn't feel like being pushed away from my place in the world. It felt like I was finally, slowly, finding it.